Please introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Rand Mattis. I'm a fourth-year student studying Chid and French.
Lovely. And why are you on Convos in the office today?
I just thought it was a really, really cool idea to kind of hear students' voices. And since I've, gone through different majors in this school, I feel like there's a lot that I've learned and a lot I want to talk about and share.
Great. You told me that you were a business major?
I used to be a business major.
Okay. Can you tell me about your experience?
Yes, that's kind of what I want to talk about today, and that's what I'm going to be writing my thesis on, kind of like building a bridge between the humanities and business. So specifically for my experience in business, in high school, I always thought business was like the perfect thing. I'm like a pretty extroverted person.
Okay.
I feel like, everyone just says with business you can do anything, and I was like, perfect, I want to do anything. So I come to UW, I apply to get into business, like the direct admit, don't get accepted, and I was like, oh, that's fine, I'll just do like the prereqs and apply. So I go through my freshman year, sophomore year doing the prerequisites, applying. There's some bizarre things. I think one that really strikes out is one of the best ways to get accepted into the foster school. Advice for anyone is people take the prerequisites at community colleges, because the weed out classes at UW normally give you a way lower GPA, which is way harder to get accepted. But I feel like that kind of becomes an unfair advantage for people that can afford to pay two different like payments for different universities, because you have to pay for the community college tuition, then you have to pay for UW tuition at the same time. So it's kind of like an economic investment to become part of this school. Of course, you can just do really well in the classes, but that's much more difficult than like taking the easy way out. So I always found that interesting. So I had the privilege to take those community college classes. I do the prerequisites. Everything was, I was taking lots of international studies courses at the same time, as well as some like LSJ, Law, Society, and Justice courses. And it kind of, some like red flags started to appear when the things being taught in business classes were in like direct opposition to what was being taught in my humanities courses. Like my humanities courses taught a lot about like neoliberalism, capitalism, like a economy of exploitation, which I found really interesting. I was like, like why do they teach that? But I was like, whatever, it's not that deep. So I go, I apply to business school, I get accepted, super excited. I'm like, yes, finally, I can be on the cool crowd, like the cool in crowd. And I start my classes, my first quarter. I start going to my classes, and I'm just like, I feel really isolated. The first thing that came up right away was during this time in my life, I was really like exploring fashion, and I was really like trying to be confident in like my sexuality, and my gender. So I'm like wearing makeup. I'm like a male presenting person, but I'm like wearing makeup. I'm wearing like feminine clothing to these classes, because I'm like, it shouldn't matter what I wear. Like I just like being confident in what I wear. Like the amount of stares and like the amount of like little like side comments I got from what I was wearing was mind blowing, because I never experienced anything like that in humanities. It was like I was at a different school when I like entered this space. And then repeatedly as I'm going through my first quarter, there are so many like comments, not about me, but about other students made by professors, or things that professors say, or things that other students say that I thought were just like not really okay. I think a couple like small examples was there was like a plethora of microaggressions, like a teacher telling the Korean kid in class to read the Chinese characters on the whiteboard, or like performing a traditional bow, or like making comments like, oh, like this food business wouldn't work in this country because like they're all vegetarian, even when not everyone would be vegetarian in that country. Just kind of like making grand assumptions about cultures that someone would know about. And I was like, oh, for a school that's supposed to be, University of Washington, supposed to be so international, why are we making such like cultural mistakes? And a continuation of that, and kind of like the coup de grace of my foster experiences, foster experience is when one of my professors was going over the topic of gender discrimination in the workplace. And of course, he's this old white guy, and he's talking about how women are way too sensitive nowadays. Like, you can't even hold a door open for a woman, he says. Like, he's like, it's just mind-blowing what, like, the media has done to women in our society. And I was not really okay with this. I was like, I feel...
it's kind of a weird take.
Yeah, kind of a weird take. So during the break in class, it's like a 2-hour class, there's a break in the middle. I go up to him and I'm like, hey, like, not to like make a deal or anything, but I wasn't really comfortable with what you said about gender discrimination. I feel like you should have given, or you should give the women of the classroom the opportunity to talk about how like they feel when you discuss gender discrimination, rather than just your opinion. Because I feel like it's important for like students to like speak up and have a say.
Sure.
And he snapped at me. He started yelling at me. He was like, you're just trying to showboat in front of the class right now. Like, how dare you? Like, what are you doing? And he yelled at me to like sit back down. And he was like, you're just trying to make like a deal right now. You're just trying to make me upset. And I was like, no, like, genuinely, like, I just think like students should have a place to speak about an issue that affects them. And he just kept yelling at me to sit back down, and like the whole class is looking. So I go and I sit back down, and I'm just thinking, I'm like, wow, we're not in the humanities anymore.
It's embarrassing for that guy.
Yeah, it was just bizarre. And then that event combined with just kind of feeling like slightly isolated from this like idea of a community. And I really thought the foster school always talks about a new way of approaching business, a way of approaching with equity. They always talk about sustainability, diversity. They use all the big buzzwords, but then in actual execution, I didn't really witness any of that. So now for my thesis, I don't want to give like a strong critique or any like rude comments. I'm just really curious on what business and what like a more humanist approach to business can be, and kind of how, if the new generation of leaders are being raised in this like school, because they're all like taking managerial positions, like what are they missing, what are they gaining, what are they learning, and maybe just, I don't know, how to merge some of this like ideas of equity, ideas of pedagogy into a area that I don't know is super like kind of pretty rigid in their current ways of understanding. Yeah, so that's just kind of a big adventure, but that was my first couple of years at UW. A lot of switching around.
Unfortunately, that seems like the average student life in terms of unfair power dynamics first, as well as some of the craziest socializing that I've ever heard.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think I was also just discussing with my thesis advisor that I don't know if I'm gonna like get into this in my thesis because it's kind of more niche and harder to tackle, but I feel there's a link between fraternity life on campus, for fraternity, both social fraternity and professional fraternity, and power dynamics that normally constitute or will result in sexual violence against women, and the business school, because the business school has really clear hierarchies, really clear representation of what like the perfect masculine image of like someone in finance would be, and that normally results in like the degradation of women, and usually due to those like, I don't know, ways of not considering like what like consent means and what understanding different positionality means, can result in like instances of sexual violence, and that is just like from pure observation. I don't know if that's like a direct link, but I don't know, I feel like in my personal experience, when people are like, oh, it's like not that deep, it's just like a business school, for me it is that deep, because I've seen people be affected, and I've seen the damage it can do, but also I've seen the good it can do, the good, people getting a great job, being able to like support their families, so it's just, I don't know, it's something that I really want to dive into, and it's something I feel I can learn a lot from, and that's why I'm like really passionate about it right now.
No, thanks for sharing all that. And I just want to validate like your whole response to this, you know, regardless of whether or not I agree, and I agree where you're at. You know, I think there's always going to be, unfortunately, people who kind of dismiss a lot of moments that maybe cause people discomfort just because it doesn't cause them a discomfort. Unfortunately, that's going to happen throughout your whole life.
Yeah.
And, I think the best policy, sure, is to speak up, but also that could get exhausting, as you probably know. Which I guess leads me to my next question, which is, could you describe, well, first, I like to get to know, like, how you stand, if you don't mind, in terms of your gender and a presentation or otherwise, as well as the type of microaggressions or discriminations you think you've been experiencing.
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel I feel like to protect myself, I separated out things that personally affected me as things that personally affected others, because I feel like I just didn't want to take it all on. I didn't want it to be about me. I wanted it to be about my community. So I feel like I generally identify gender queer, and queer in my sexuality as well. And I think those concepts are really well, I don't know, I feel well accepted, comfortable, and very most spaces at UW. I think UW, on your first day orientation, they have you write down pronouns. It's a really small act, but I feel
sure
it helps. It totally, even though it doesn't have, a lot of people are cis and doesn't matter to them, it doesn't matter, but people that pronouns really matter to them, it really helps. So I think I'm happy in some of the strides UW is taking, but specifically for me, I think it was one of the facts is that no one was wearing any color. No one in the business school wore anything that was colorful. And I was like, where am I? What dystopian world am I in where people don't wear color? And part of the teachings of the school, I think, don't promote creativity and promote being yourself. And even if things weren't said directly hostile comments to me, I feel it's the spatial awareness of just not feeling comfortable or understood, or feeling there's people like you around you, or people that will support you. I think that would be the best way for me to answer that question.
No, I mean, as a trans woman, I agree. This is something I have to deal with a lot, trying to convince myself that I actually am right in how I'm perceiving people and their intentions, or even lack of intentions, because everyone makes a conscientious decision to say certain words and to talk to you a certain way, obviously. But it's just a game of who could come out socially appropriate, and that's harder for queer people, obviously, because there are things that deter us from quote unquote winning an argument. Number one being, we on an aesthetic level where outliers in terms of just how we look and stuff. I remember, I could relate to you 100%. Your pronouns are he, they, right? Yeah. When I used to go by he, they, before I figured out I was trans, that was definitely a problem I've had. I think in terms of liberal spaces in general, I'm not sure if you get this, but there is mild infantilization in terms of how people talk to you. There is a change, and even though people are trying their best, it's still kind of messed up, to say the very least. And just generally, it's hard to be open to yourself and to others like that, because I think there is an expectation that you are not as socially developed than other people. So I guess going off that, I'd like to hear more about how that relates to your own ponderings between what I'm hearing, the heteronormativity of the business school, or your own experience. Let me save myself there. And why there are quarrels you have, or qualms, I don't know what the right word is, regarding what I would say is the liberal nature of the academic school system.
No, that's a good question. Before I answer it, could you like give some more information on like that idea of infantilization? Because I feel like I know what you mean, but like I don't know the exact definition.
Okay, so this is a word I use a lot because I personally tend to feel like I'm not taken seriously a lot of the time for how I present openly. I mean, I could talk on and on, but it's not. I'm not the guest of my show, or Chid's show, I should say. Infantilizing, it's like treating someone as if they're a child. And psychology is normally used for like a parent treating, their kids as children, even though like they're adults or whatever, right? It's still kind of setting a sort of like a normative hierarchy within that of like, I am smarter than you and better than you because I do not, or people who do not talk to me like this, I do not socialize myself with this, but I will socialize you like this. But I feel like lately, I'm not sure if, I think lately was probably a good word in contemporary queerness, I mean, at least in my own trans spaces, I do tend to find that there is kind of like, these people are human, sure, but like more subhuman more than anything. It's kind of like the general vibe. And because I probably I associate them as subhuman probably because of who they are and how they dress and whatever, I'm going to talk to them as though everything that I'm about to say is going to light a fire under them. It's like the assumption that every queer person, it has some sort of like deep distrust for the world around them, which look, there's a lot to say on that. Queer trauma is very real, and it does infect people in very unfortunate ways. Like I've had to get rid of a lot of friends who just couldn't come to terms with themselves and better themselves, and sure, they lived hard lives, but when it's affecting me as someone in a relationship with them, well, I have to prioritize my own emotional regulation.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I mean by infantilization. It's just kind of a way to make people feel insecure, but in a way that isn't really a definitive. I mean, at least most of the time, I mean, obviously people aren't just gonna like talk to me in baby talk. Yeah. That's straight up harassment, but every once in a while they'll probably do something or say something to me as though like they're trying to humor me, and it's just like, I don't like this. I am a 26-year-old adult. Yeah, I could see, or like I feel I've witnessed people saying something completely normal and then they're like, oh, sorry, like what? I'm not offended. Thanks for defining that helps me like understand your frame of reference more. I think one of my good friends and also my sister both have really nailed this idea into me lately that whenever people are like rude, or I don't know, or this isn't all the time, sometimes people can be rude for no reason, or another person can be doing something legitimately upsetting, but a lot of time when people make a comment or something, they're just like projecting their own insecurity onto someone. And I forgot the quote of my friend, she was like it was like something about not being what people think of you, or like not accepting what people think of you, and I feel that's something that's like really hard to understand with like trans and queer studies stuff, just because I don't know, it still makes such a big effect. Like if someone makes a comment about what you're wearing, about how you act, about like your voice, it's like ignoring that takes so much willpower and just moving on. And I think my theory, or like this is Rand's personal working hypothesis on like empathy and queerness, is I feel that when people are like part of any non-societally acceptable like minority group, you just become more empathetic for other people's traumas and issues because you've experienced something on a similar level. Like
if you're like a BIPOC woman and like you have like had many microaggressions on the daily basis, I feel there's a higher chance you would be more empathetic for someone else, minority group. Or if you're queer and you've had to deal with coming out and all this, like it's these like small acts of, I guess, rebellion against like the status quo that makes you more empathetic. I feel like I've gotten a lot more empathetic coming more to terms with how I identify myself. It's just a working theory, but I don't know. I feel really passionate about I don't know, people coming together and it's like seeing their differences as similarities. Sounds really meta, but
Seeing their differences as similarities.
Yeah.
But I do want to learn a little bit about you as yourself, as your person, how you got to the 4th year student you are now. Yeah.
That's a fun question.
Mm-hmm.
Where would you like me to start?
Where you grew up, why you chose UW.
Oh, okay.
Your current feelings on your social life. Everything. Well, I mean, I do think they're kind of intertwined.
No, they're so intertwined.
If you're gonna discuss and to dissect other people's conversational styling, then just your general presentation, you should probably dissect yours first.
No, that's so true. No,
Yeah.
that's so true. I love talking about myself.
Talk about yourself.
I was born in Woodinville, Washington. Or actually, maybe like Everett, but my family lives in Woodinville, Washington.
Okay.
My parents study philosophy in school. My mom's side is from Tennessee. My dad's side is from Syracuse, New York. And that was like a cool way to get raised because my parents are very critical. They're very humanities focused things that like thinkers, and I think that's kind of stemming what I'm starting to study. I have an older sister who's super cool. My family means a lot to me. I definitely have an interesting relationship with them, as most people have with their families.
Sure.
It's all over the place. I really like Washington. I think it's a beautiful state. I think Washington gets slandered. Everyone's always like, it's so rainy, but it's so beautiful. And this is, I'll bring it back, but you know, like when people study abroad and they just go and they do it, like they adventure everywhere and they do everything because they're like in another country and they're like, oh my god, it's the coolest thing in the whole world, like this place is the best place in the world. Like I feel like I want to bring that concept to like where I currently live. Like why can't I treat where I am right now like how people treat their study abroads? Like Seattle's a bomb ass city.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's not the best in the world, but like, you know, it's cool. It's like we have so much beautiful nature. Okay, so I was like very like, I feel like pretty typical like upper middle class white neighborhood upbringing. I think the only like subversion of that was because kind of my parents kind of being like kind of they weren't big fans of like typical suburbia, like driving the nice car or like having like the country club or whatever. They like weren't really into that, and then like they kind of, people didn't like my family because they weren't really into that stuff as much, that my family kind of felt isolated. And then my sister came out when she was like in high school, and that was like really hard for my family. And also my sister's neurodivergent. My sister has autism. So, and my dad does too. And my mom and I have ADHD. So we have a very neurodivergent family. But also I kind of believe everyone is like a little neurodivergent. It's just the ones that we choose to acknowledge, like how productive someone can be. So I think the neurodivergentness plus the queerness kind of gave this path to like, oh shit, like I gotta kind of figure out my own stuff because I don't think I'm really like everybody else. And I've always loved people. I love talking to people. I love learning from people. I love getting proven wrong and when people call me out, because I think, especially me, even though my parents were like a more like critical philosophy, like just being like a white kid raised in the suburbs, there's so much unlearning that I have to do, especially when it comes to queerness, because there's just so many stereotypes. There's just so much there. Lots of unlearning. Unlearning's fun and dandy.
It is fun and dandy, actually.
It is fun and dandy.
That was quick. Would you like to plug in anything?
Plug anything? I don't think so. I feel if there's any like cool chid talks coming up, people should go to them because they're really cool and there's a lot to learn even if you don't have any interest in the talk.
We have free food.
And there's free food.
Sometimes. Most of the time.
Sometimes.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Rand.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.